Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday if you ever saw the movie Groundhog Day, that's the world we live in right now, right? Where you wake up and it seems like everything's the same and it's bad news and trying to find the optimism and the positivity and all this stuff. Um, I, uh, I thought we'd put together another webinar. The webinar Monday over all of the changes went pretty well, and we had really positive feedback, and I thank you for that. And if this is something of value, I'm happy to do it. So here we are. Tomorrow is the day when the Payroll Protection Program is supposed to be live at all of the banks or credit unions if they're SBA delegates. The SBA is trying to expand the network so that it applies to more than just delegate banks, and they're working on that. The applications for the businesses to the banks have been released, but I want to catch up on a few things because there's still quite a bit of uncertainty for a program that's going live tomorrow. In fact, this morning as I was preparing for the webinar, Wall Street Journal flashed an article that's going to be published tomorrow that talks about how the banks still have a lot of questions about how these procedures work, how much credit worthiness verification they're supposed to be doing, and different things like that. And so I'm telling you that I would like to have definitive answers for everything because it's going live tomorrow, but we don't. I have a pretty good idea of what I think is going to happen, but that could change. And so what am I doing? I'm filling out an application and I'm going to get it to my banker tomorrow. And if they need to change it or we need to do something, then I'll just work with it and go through it, because as you're going to find out as a result of this call, the chances are that you're not going to file an application tomorrow and get a check tomorrow. And that's just the reality of the program. It's a massive amount of money. It's, 360 billion, $370 billion. And there's going to be a massive amount of businesses applying for this aid because it covers businesses that go up to 500 employees. And it covers nonprofits that have less than 500 employees. So be patient, keep your cool, make sure, and I told everybody Monday, use this week to get your documents and records ready to go so that you can provide information to the bank quickly. And if you haven't got that ready to go, then keep working on it and get it done, because there's things you're going to need, and that's going to become clearer as we go through the presentation today. So just know that the lenders and the SBA are still working on some issues with respect to this program, and then we'll move into the program. It was my intention to email everybody a set of the application documents, including the instructions, before this started. However, we had a technical glitch. I know that they're out there in the wild and that a lot of people already have access to them. If you do not have them and you need the application form and you need different things, contact Kathy via email, Kathy@americantbp.com. And she'd be happy to email you the documents, which includes the application and the instructions that go with it. This is something that I've never seen, but the SBA and the government have actually put together. I'm sorry to be distracted, but this is the application. 2 pages. That's it. Now, that doesn't mean that's all you have to submit, but I've never seen an application like this for a government program. And so it's pretty streamlined for the government purposes, but it's got a couple of things that we need to talk about. So let's just jump into the application. As you know, we talked about the Payroll Protection Program is based upon your payroll, and it will give you 2.5 times your average monthly payroll. The measuring period from the instructions is calendar year 2019. Okay. So calculate your average payroll, including your healthcare, health insurance premiums paid, your match on your IRAs or 401k programs. Calculate those costs. Now, payroll taxes. There is some feeling out there that you can include your state unemployment tax and maybe your federal unemployment tax. I myself am omitting those numbers. One, because they're relatively small numbers. You know, your state unemployment tax is usually a very small percentage of the first $25,000 of people's wages, and the time to go back and calculate and add it in, plus the skepticism about whether it's included or not, is I've just decided I'm going to forego that and not include it in my average payroll costs and just take payroll and independent contractors, and that's what I'm including, plus my health insurance costs, plus my match on my retirement plans. The employment taxes, employer side employment taxes, are not included. Okay, so they are specifically prohibited from being included in this. Don't count FICA, don't count the match, don't count the employer side match. The employee side match is included because that's the gross salary. That number's in there at some point, but you can't include the employer match, so just don't do it. Now, if you are a new business, you can use January and February of 2020 to calculate your average payroll. If you are a seasonal employer, a farm or a business like that, that you employ most of your people in the summertime or harvest time, planting time, retail stores, that sort of environment, then you are able to use a different method to calculate your average payroll, which is way beyond the context of this call or webinar. So if you're a seasonal employer, we'll have to get together offline, or you'll have to check your other resources, but they have a different way of calculating it. So for the vast majority of the people that have joined us today, it is 2019 average monthly payroll. Okay. I'm dropping mine into a spreadsheet, and I include my costs, and then I have a line for independent contractors. And if they come back and say you can't include independent contractors, which it's in the law that you include it, but you know, at this point, if you need the money quickly, you know, do you want to fight or do you want to get the money? And that's might be what it comes down to for some businesses if they're really on that type of a shoestring. But I'm just putting the independent contractor separately. One, so that it can be verified via 1099, and two, because then I can readily, you know, omit it if I don't need it, if it's not eligible for, if the banks insist that it's not eligible for the funding. The instructions say that you're going to have to verify, you know, that you're swearing under penalties of perjury, the information is correct and accurate, and that the documentation you submit is also the same as what you submitted to the IRS. What that means to me is, at a minimum, you are going to have to include your employment tax returns for last year. A lot of you don't have your 2019 taxes done yet. A lot of businesses have already extended until September 15th, and they don't have the tax return done. And since this is a payroll only thing, I would imagine that the payroll tax returns would suffice this purpose. I'm preparing mine to share. And so I don't think anybody needs to be a panic to hurry up and get your 2019 business tax return done, because I think since this is a payroll-based tax and they need to confirm your payroll, that the 941s and 1099s should suffice. If you haven't filed 1099s for people that you're going to claim under this, you might file it even if it's not necessary, simply because then you've got a paper trail and you can establish that you paid the amount to a contractor. So those are the questions are on average payroll and the independent contractors. As I said, I'm including my independent contractors. They're valuable people, and what they do is important to me, and they're also important to my business, and they don't come without some cost. Okay. Now, the instructions also are a little bit more limiting than what I interpreted the law to be. So the way the instructions are read is that your payroll spend, so remember how the program works is you can borrow 2.5 times your average monthly payroll cost or spend for 2019. You can borrow 2.5 times that. Your loan is forgiven to the extent that during the 8-week period from when your loan funds, you spend that money on payroll, rent, the interest on mortgage payments, not the whole mortgage payment, or utilities. Now, if you read these instructions, there's kind of an undercurrent in the document that if you're not going to use the money for those 4 purposes, that they're not going to give you the loan, which isn't consistent with what was read, right? Because there was a forgivable portion and then maybe a non-forgivable portion, and the non-forgivable portion could then be, charged a maximum of 4% interest, and, had a 3-year term and different provisions. And so I think that the instructions are a little bit more limiting, but I would take them at its worth because the SBA had authority to issue regulations and rules regarding this process. And so the instructions also include a forgiveness test that was not included in the law. So the test is, they're saying in here, because they think this is going to be a really full program, is that if you haven't spent 75% of the money on payroll, you're not going to meet the threshold to get forgiveness. Now, that 75% is not in the law. And that's an interpretation that they've issued. And I think it's probably to streamline it because of the volume they anticipate. But this is really meant for you to keep your payroll on staff and paid. Again, the forgiveness is affected if you haven't used, according to the instructions, if you haven't used 75% for payroll, forgiveness is going to be affected. If you cut staff, that affects your forgiveness ability. And if you've reduced pay 25% or more on your employees, that also affects your forgiveness. So I would just be very mindful of that. Again, and the instructions make this clear. There is going to be an application process involved for you to claim forgiveness, right? So you have to use, in that 8-week period, you have to use the loan amount in that 8-week period for payroll, rent, interest on mortgage payments, or utilities. That part is eligible for forgiveness now, with the caveat that payroll has to be 75% of those costs. You then have to apply back for the forgiveness. And the more I've thought about it, the advice I gave on Monday to open up a separate bank account, put the loan proceeds directly into it, and pay those items out of a separate bank account makes more sense than ever. Because there's direct tracing. You're going to need the records. You're probably going to need some payroll records on top of that, just to verify that it was used for payroll. But if you're using a service and ADP is dinging your account for payroll, that's pretty good evidence, even though you might need some additional paperwork to prove up the number of employees that you didn't cut pay. You'll have to do those certifications and stuff. So I'm still recommending that you open a separate bank account for these monies. Don't commingle them with other funds. If you get a check and you haven't got a new bank account, sit at the bank until they open up a new account and give them that check to deposit it into it. And since it's only going to be there for a couple of weeks, maybe you just ask the bank to print you 15 or 25 counter checks. And then you arrange for your payroll service to do a direct withdrawal out of it. And then you've got a few checks to cover rent or any other expenses that are on the forgivable list that you can pay out of those monies. So think this through and do it from the beginning. Don't start with one system and then switch to another system midstream, because it's an 8-week period and it's just going to make your life more complicated. All right. So we have that on the forgiveness side, 75%. Now, the other item that we talked about on Monday was the fact that there was 2 SBA programs. There's an economic injury disaster program, which is not payroll based. And then there's the payroll protection program. The instructions make it clear that you can't state the same reason on an application for both loans for needing the money. So in this loan, you're swearing and affirming that you need the money for payroll, rent, utilities, that sort of stuff because of the economic uncertainty of our times. So if you're applying for an economic injury disaster loan, you probably need to change the description a little bit about what to do. You know, we had inventory costs that we're not going to recover through sales. We had, you know, different cash flow constraints because of our lost revenue, something along those lines that don't involve directly payroll. And so that's what we're seeing with this application form as well. Another question on the application that really kind of made me scratch my head. I'm like, I don't get this, but you know, at what point, at some point, what do you do, right? You throw your hands up and I've got to comply with this in order to make it work. But there is an affiliation question on here that is not supposed to be on there because the law specifically says to the SBA, waive your affiliation requirements for this. But there's a question, it's question 3, and it asks about common management. And it says, is the business or any owner an owner? So in your business, you've got to define people that are more than 20% owners of the company. That's on page 1 of the application. If any of those people are associated with another company that has common management, not defined in the instructions, but common management, then you're supposed to disclose that. Now, in the tax world, we have controlled groups and we have, you know, different rules that we're trying to apply. And in the SBA setting, they must have a different set of rules. And the only reason I can think that they're putting this in there is because they're trying to avoid people filing applications on behalf of multiple companies that are all intertwined and that may lead to duplication of benefits. I don't know. I'm baffled. I think all this does is slow the process down if they have to start investigating affiliations. I actually thought as simple as this application was, I thought the process, perhaps mistakenly and maybe naively, would be a lot faster than what the paperwork contemplates. But this isn't going to be something where you drop paperwork off in the morning. At least tomorrow, I'll be stunned if people get paid tomorrow. But it doesn't seem to me, because of the uncertainty on the lender side and some of these issues on the borrower side, that you can drop the application off and walk out with a check later that day, which could really have a profound effect on certain business owners. And so I hope they kind of get some of these things resolved. The Wall Street Journal article that I mentioned earlier this morning basically said that the SBA had declined comment. So that means they were working furiously behind the scenes to try to figure this out, because I think there's a lot of attention being paid to this process, and it will be a lot of negative press if it's perceived to not be coming out as quickly or as well as people hope. So, and on the common management side, I mean, you think about it, like take my example, for instance. I mean, I have a tax and accounting company, I have a law firm, I have a consulting business, and I also have a real estate company. Those companies aren't really related. We do separate engagements for each company, and they don't typically go back and forth. And other than my ownership of those companies, or the fact that I'm involved in management and all, I mean, that makes it common management. I can't split myself up, right? But they really don't. I don't have any payroll in my management company, and I run all my payroll through the law firm at this point. So it's like, okay, I'm going to give you all this data, but I don't know what it's for. And I'm a guy that doesn't like to give data out if I don't have to, but I'm just resigning myself to, if I want the benefits of these loans, these are hoops that I've got to jump through. So with both the independent contractor, the affiliation, those sorts of things, it's I guess no good deed goes unpunished, and you have to be willing to just kind of bite the bullet on some of the things, even though you don't think they're completely correct. Now, we discussed a little bit about the certification requirements. Page 2 of the application is actually the certification requirements. And we talked about this on Monday, but The first certification question or point that you have to verify is that the current economic uncertainty makes the loan request necessary to support ongoing operations. That's easy. The second one is that the funds will be used to retain workers and maintain payroll or make mortgage payments, lease payments, or utility payments. I understand that if the funds are used for unauthorized purposes, the federal government may pursue criminal fraud charges. So this says to me that in the SBA world, they're viewing the economic injury fund as the larger lending vehicle for businesses whose businesses declined rapidly because of this, and that this is really meant to keep people employed. And they really are trying to narrow the focus of this loan and limit it so that you're not using the money for a lot of different things. Okay. Now I don't, like I said, on Monday when we went through this, that was not, that wasn't that stark, right? It made it sound like some would be forgiven, some would be unforgiven. This is the way it works, but they've really hammered down on this, and you're certifying to this. So, make sure that you're only taking as much money as you need in the application process, and that you've done a budget for that 8 weeks, and you know what your payroll spend is going to be, know what your rent and utilities are going to be, so that you can meet both the 75% test and meet the factor that the money is being used for those purposes, so you don't unintentionally get into some sort of trouble. All right. You have to verify the number of full-time employees and the dollar amounts. You have to verify everything, okay, in order to get the forgiveness. So you're certifying to that. And it says loan forgiveness will be provided for the sum of documented payroll costs, covered mortgage interest payments, covered rent payments, and covered utilities. All right, so then they're saying due to high subscription, it is anticipated that not more than 25% of the forgiven amount may be for non-payroll costs. So this is the 75% just stated a different way. So of the money you get, 75% is going for payroll costs. During the period beginning February 15th, 2020 and December 31st, 2020, the applicant has not and will not receive another loan under this program. So this might be going back to the common management affiliation question, but it's based on TIN. So if you're applying under a business that has a taxpayer identification number, the application should be limited to that entity. I'm only filing one, even though I have multiple companies, just because I've got my payroll in one company. So it makes it a little bit easier. If you have payroll in multiple companies, I think you need to maybe make a choice and just do it under the company that you would prefer to, that has the largest payroll, or that, you know, that you can budget and make plans accordingly. There's 2 more certifications, and I'm going through these just because these are fairly important. I further certify that the information provided in this application and the information that I have provided in all supporting documents and forms is true and accurate. And then makes a statement that if you knowingly make a false statement, you're in trouble. And you're in big trouble if you knowingly make a false statement, because they tell you all the bad things they can do to you in there. So just don't do it. And then the last certification is I acknowledge that the lender will calculate the eligible loan amount using tax documents I have submitted. I affirm that those tax documents are identical to those I submitted to the IRS. Again, a lot of businesses have extended their tax returns, and there's no way tax and accounting offices can get them turned around in 2 days or 3 days or a week. So I'm assuming payroll tax reports will be sufficient for that certification and for them to calculate the average payroll amount. Now, you do not have to apply tomorrow, okay? The loan application process opens tomorrow. It closes June 30th of 2020. Now, obviously, if you're a small business and you need the money, you're not going to wait that long to file it. And if you filed it June 30th, I don't know what the process is to determine eligibility, calculate the costs and all that stuff. You know, so you might as well, if you're going to go for the payroll protection program, then you might as well file the application sooner and let it get into the process and into the queue and start working through. On the economic injury disaster loan, I have not had any clients yet that have successfully received a loan. I have one client that has requested the $10,000 advance that we talked about on Monday, and I'm thinking that that money should be released on Monday based on a 3 business day rule. So we'll see how that goes. And I think that's it. That covers the application process and the changes that we've noticed. Again, if you have any questions on the chat, I'm happy to try to answer them. And, you know, as we get more details and as the lender program the lender side of it fills out, then we'll be happy to do another one and kind of fill in any remaining gaps. Again, if you don't have the application packet, Kathy can send that to you if you contact her at Kathy@AmericanTBP.com. This is being recorded, so yeah, if you want to look at it later, you can record it. Let's see, there's a number of questions here. So there's a statement, you need to do it fast because they say once the money is gone, it's gone. I agree with that generally, but we still don't know the relationship between the SBA and the bank and the forgiveness calculation and things like that, which will all factor into how fast the 370 goes. But since this is meant to be a payroll protection program, I would imagine that anybody that can do this or needs to do this is going to do this quickly. But yeah, why delay? I'd get it in there as fast as I can. So the answer, so the question is on the affiliation on that is, I would answer the question yes, and I would just describe that, you know, the company's share owners who also manage, or, you know, the company's share key individuals, and therefore they have common management, but they aren't otherwise interrelated, or they're very limited in a relationship, just something like that. Make it truthful, because all this stuff's under penalties of perjury, but, you know, I don't know that I would go into a 10-paragraph description of things. I would just keep it brief and accurate. So yeah, a lot of questions about paragraph 3 or the question 3, and I'm telling you that I have questions too. It's one that I'm going to answer yes. I'm going to disclose the other companies that I have ownership in, and common management is limited to the fact that I'm involved in them. But they make separate business decisions and they're doing separate things. So that appears to be what the questions are about, and that's exactly what I anticipated. Kathy can send out a link to the recording as soon as it's available to us on Zoom. And if you have other questions, you know how to email me at bwilley@americantbp.com. And again, if you need the forms, Kathy is happy to email them to you. So hopefully this has been of value to you, and we'll catch up on the next one. Everybody have a great day. Hey, and keep your spirits up, right? There are opportunities that are out there right now. And if you can keep your spirits, make smart decisions, and innovate and adapt, there is going to be opportunity. And this is going to go away, and stay positive. We'll get through this. And it's just a lot of uncertainty, and it's scary. So everybody keep the faith up. If you need a pep talk, give me a call. I'm happy to help. You guys have a great day.